Bolivia, a nation known for its stunning landscapes and vibrant culture, is facing a deepening economic crisis. The situation is dire, with shortages, inflation, and debt plaguing the country. Many Bolivians are struggling to afford basic necessities. The crisis threatens to unravel years of economic progress. Uncertainty hangs in the air as people worry about their future. The crisis is complex, with multiple factors at play. Fuel shortages have brought transportation and businesses to a standstill. The scarcity of US dollars makes importing goods increasingly difficult. This perfect storm of economic woes has left many feeling helpless and uncertain. The government's response has been met with growing criticism. President Luis Arce faces accusations of inaction and mismanagement. Protests have erupted across the country, with citizens demanding solutions and a change in leadership. The situation in Bolivia is a stark reminder of the fragility of economic stability. The most visible sign of the crisis is the severe fuel shortage gripping the nation. Long lines at gas stations are a daily occurrence. People wait for hours, sometimes even days, hoping to get enough fuel to go about their lives. The shortages have crippled transportation, making it difficult for people to get to work, school, or even the market. The scarcity of US dollars is another major problem. Bolivia relies heavily on imports, and the lack of dollars makes it harder to buy essential goods from abroad. This has led to shortages of basic items like food and medicine. Prices for these goods have skyrocketed, making them unaffordable for many. The impact on everyday life is devastating. Families are struggling to put food on the table. The cost of living is rising rapidly, while wages remain stagnant. Many are forced to cut back on essential expenses just to survive. The economic hardship is taking a toll on the health and well-being of the Bolivian people. The situation is particularly dire for those in rural areas, where access to goods and services is already limited. The crisis has exposed the deep inequalities that exist within Bolivian society. The government's promises of a quick fix have proven hollow, leaving many feeling disillusioned and abandoned. The Bolivian government, led by President Luis Arce, has been criticized for its handling of the economic crisis. Arce, who came to power promising to continue the socialist policies of his predecessor, Evo Morales, has so far failed to alleviate the suffering of the Bolivian people. One of the main criticisms leveled at the government is its continued reliance on fuel subsidies. While these subsidies are intended to make fuel more affordable, they have also contributed to the shortages. The government buys fuel at international prices and sells it at a loss domestically, leading to a thriving black market and exacerbating the scarcity. Critics argue that these subsidies are unsustainable and that the government should instead focus on structural reforms. These reforms, they say, should aim to diversify the economy, attract foreign investment, and reduce the role of the state in the economy. However, the government has been reluctant to implement such reforms, fearing a backlash from its base. The government's 2025 budget proposal has also raised concerns. The budget includes a significant increase in spending, which critics say will only worsen the country's debt problem. The government argues that the spending is necessary to stimulate the economy and help those most affected by the crisis, but many remain unconvinced. To understand the current crisis, it's essential to look back at Bolivia's recent economic history. Under Evo Morales, who served as president from 2006 to 2019, Bolivia experienced an economic boom. This boom was largely driven by high prices for natural gas, Bolivia's main export. Morales used the revenue from natural gas exports to fund social programs and invest in infrastructure. This led to a significant reduction in poverty and inequality. However, this economic model was heavily dependent on high commodity prices. When natural gas prices began to fall in 2014, Bolivia's economy began to unravel. The government responded by depleting its foreign currency reserves to maintain spending. This approach provided a temporary cushion, but ultimately proved unsustainable. By the time Morales left office in 2019, Bolivia's foreign currency reserves had dwindled significantly, leaving the country vulnerable to external shocks. The current crisis is in many ways a legacy of the Morales era. The government's over-reliance on natural gas, coupled with its reluctance to implement structural reforms, has left the country ill-equipped to deal with the current economic challenges. Section 6. A cry for change, public outrage and demands for action. The economic crisis has sparked widespread public anger and frustration. Protests have erupted across the country, with citizens demanding solutions from the government. People are fed up with the shortages, the inflation, and the government's perceived inaction. The protests are a reflection of the growing sense of desperation among the Bolivian people. They are struggling to make ends meet, and they see no end in sight to their hardship. The protests are also a sign of the deep mistrust that exists between the government and the governed. The government has responded to the protests with a mix of repression and promises of dialogue. However, these efforts have done little to quell the unrest. The people are demanding real solutions, not empty promises. They want to see a government that is responsive to their needs and committed to improving their lives. Section 7. Charting a path forward. Reforms for a sustainable future. Experts agree that Bolivia needs to implement significant economic reforms to overcome the current crisis. These reforms should aim to create a more diversified and resilient economy, one that is less dependent on volatile commodity prices. One of the most pressing reforms is to reduce the government's role in the economy. This means reducing subsidies, privatizing state-owned enterprises, and creating a more business-friendly environment. The goal is to attract foreign investment and create jobs. Another key reform is to diversify the economy beyond natural gas. This means investing in other sectors, such as agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing. Bolivia has the potential to be a major agricultural producer, and tourism is a growing sector with significant untapped potential. Finally, the government needs to address the country's chronic fiscal deficit. This means reducing spending, improving tax collection, and tackling corruption. These reforms will be difficult and will require sacrifices from all Bolivians. However, they are essential if the country is to avoid a complete economic collapse. Section 8. International Lifeline. Seeking support in troubled times. Bolivia is not alone in facing economic challenges. Many developing countries are struggling with similar problems, exacerbated by the global economic slowdown. In these difficult times, international cooperation and support are more important than ever. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank have both offered financial assistance to Bolivia. These institutions have a long history of providing loans and technical assistance to countries facing economic crises. However, these loans often come with conditions attached, such as requirements for economic reforms. Bolivia has so far been reluctant to accept these conditions, fearing that they would undermine its sovereignty and harm the poor. However, as the crisis deepens, the government may have no choice but to seek assistance from these international lenders. In addition to financial assistance, Bolivia can also benefit from technical expertise and knowledge sharing from other countries. Many countries have successfully implemented economic reforms in the past, and Bolivia can learn from their experiences. Section 9. A nation at a crossroads. The urgency for decisive action. Bolivia stands at a crossroads. The country faces a stark choice: embrace meaningful reforms or risk a complete economic collapse. The path ahead will be difficult, requiring tough decisions and sacrifices from all segments of society. The government needs to act decisively and strategically to steer the country out of this crisis. It must prioritize the needs of its people and work towards a more just and equitable society. The international community can play a supportive role, providing financial assistance and technical expertise. The time for half measures and political maneuvering is over. The future of Bolivia, its people and its economy hangs in the balance. The hope is that the nation can come together, find common ground, and chart a new course towards a more prosperous and sustainable future.